Ladies and gentlemen, it is a special day for us here as we're checking out Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. That's right, it is the sequel to Remake Final Fantasy VII, and it's been a long time coming for fans. And you might have noticed, that's right, I'm Drew, that is Steve, and the friendly face is none other than Brad Davidson. Brad, what's going on, buddy? Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. I was gutted that I missed out on the Final Fantasy 16 one you guys had done before. So when you asked if I could jump on this, I was like, yeah, let's do it.
Nice. Yeah, you are definitely our Final Fantasy expert when it comes to this. This is where I kind of want to preface this is, Brad, how well do you know the world of Final Fantasy? Like, have you played them all? What's your history with Final Fantasy?
Nintendo, OG, for like way back with the Heroes of Light. So I mean, I've done pretty much every Final Fantasy. So
yeah, well historied. which is
I
fair.
guess so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Which is one of the reasons why you're here. So Steve and I have gone on with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. We played the game, and you have played the demo. So you're gonna have some insights on that. I'm gonna pick your brain. You're gonna pick our brain and shoot when you have a question, right? Steve, what's your history with Final Fantasy?
Well, not much to be honest about. It was probably Final Fantasy VII Remake, which I was grinding through that one and was enjoying it, and then obviously. And the one we're reviewing today, the Rebirth.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're the only two I've sort of played, but I've got the feel of it, so I think I'm pretty confident in my opinion on this game.
That's fair. That's fair. My history has been an awkward one from an outsider, right? I played 10. 10 is what really kind of hooked me on the franchise, and then from there I bounced. I jumped into one of Brad's favorites, 15. Checked out that for a little bit, didn't really click, right? Didn't really click all that well for me. And then 16 blew my mind. It was my game of the year last year. And then when Final Fantasy VII Remake, I was like, okay, I gotta tap back into that one, check that out, and then I'm jumped obviously into Rebirth, and here we go. It is definitely one of those. Final Fantasy has never really been my biggest thing. I find it's like little pockets. And I'm like, oh, that one looks cool. Let's check out that one. And that was 10 for me, really. And then 16 is really what hooked me. And then getting into Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which is then initially, it like takes right off of Remake, right? This is a continuation, and this is where it starts. Yeah. So if you haven't played Remake, go back, finish up Final Fantasy VII Remake, and then jump into Rebirth. It'll help you out immensely, because it's still confusing regardless at the end of the day, right? So, Brad, you played the demo. Demo does chapter 1. You get the idea and the gist of where it's going. What are your thoughts on the demo?
So, like, I loved it. I mean, what I found was it did suffer from a lot of camera angle issues. I noticed that in a lot of the tighter areas. But they did change the how Cloud explains the story.
Go ahead.
I know you're editing this out, so I don't know if I can say this or not. Like, it's not really a spoiler, but in the original Final Fantasy VII, he talks about all of this when they're in the town of Calm, instead of leaving Midgar. Like, so that was the first big change that I noticed between the original Final Fantasy VII and the remake, was that like he's telling them the story after they had left Midgar in the game, but it was pretty faithful to the original. There was a couple things added in that I was like, okay, well, it's not really necessary, but I mean, they have to hook the new generation somehow. So it wasn't bad. It's just coming from playing the original. Exactly. Playing the original, it's like, you know what to expect. So
that's fair. That's fair. The story is definitely a little bit different than the original, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, the remake was a 2-hour story in the first, like the original game. Like they opened it up to a 20-hour story, and they kind of had to flesh out all these different characters, which makes sense. But yeah, the whole Midgar story was about 2 hours in the original PlayStation 1 game.
Yeah, so it's definitely hooked us, I think, in a different way now to bring it to a modern style. So where we are now with Rebirth, Steve, what are your feelings? What are your thoughts on this with your time with the game? How did it connect with you?
Yes and no.
Yep.
I don't know what it is. I found the first one, the remake. I was very addicted to it. I just loved everything about it, and it was good jumping into this one because obviously the combat's the same mechanics as we'll talk about in a minute.
Yeah.
But for some reason, there was this with all the cutscenes, which are phenomenally good, and the voice acting, it kind of drew me in. But there's so much cutscenes, and when I did get into the gameplay, for some reason, for me, it felt like it was lacking something in the open world. I don't know what it was. For me, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No. Okay. So let's talk about, because there's two parts to the open world. You get this grand opening, and it's just like whoa, right? The heavens open, and then you see the landscape, and you're like, dang, this is big. this is big, right? And I'm like, okay, cool. How empty is this world gonna be? How full is this world gonna be? Because what I see right now, it is gorgeous. The world is beautiful. I love the world design. Here's the problem. I don't like the level design. Because as the characters are moving through this open space, there's lots to do. I always found like I always had somewhere to go and something to achieve. But it's the traversal of going from one spot to the next. It's a lot of these broken up, jagged little rock ledges. Some you can climb, some you can't. I never knew. Like in other games, you look at games and you go, okay, Red Dead, right? I can see a spot on the map. I can go there. Yeah. In Rebirth, I never felt confident that I could make it to that spot because of the land traversal. And as our characters are moving, so I'm playing as Cloud a lot, but you're able to switch up your party, which I appreciate. I love having the ability to introduce everybody else. Because we were talking to who our favorite current character is. Red is definitely a standout. So it is that. It's funny, I'm coming around a little bit on Barrett too, but that was a bit of a shocker for me because Bear was just he's just an overbearing guy sometimes. But moving through the land, it's so like hoppy and like jagged at times, right? I feel like a movement. It's not like when you're on other games. Even when you go to Assassin's Creed, you walk and you can climb and then you can walk and it's all smooth transition. Here, you get to a ledge, and it's just like, and then you're down. And then you want to climb back up, and you almost have to, like, hop. But there is no jump button. And then you get to other ledges, the other edges. There's these little quick time mechanics where you have to go into it, but then it bumps you up. It turns into a cinematic, but then you have to continue to climb. It's just so broken feeling to me. It just breaks it up, right? Is that where you're at too, Steve?
Yeah, that's the issue. Having no climb or jump button, because you have to physically run full force to something to make it climb. The interaction, and like you said, it was sometimes it'll work, sometimes it wouldn't. And then, like Brad mentioned, I had the same issue with the camera angles. Then all of a sudden, everything's right on top of you,
right? And
you have to sort of move around because you have like bushes or something in the way. But the climbing mechanic, there isn't one. So I found it very frustrating because, like you said, the levels are not straight. They're all different tiers. And you can't always go the route that you want to do. So you have to deviate or climb things to go to a different level. And it feels hard.
Clunky. Yeah. It just feels really clunky and somewhat dated, right? I think is at the end of the day, the mechanic. But then chocobos are introduced. And this is like your saving grace for getting around landscapes and fast travel points, so we can just hop, and away you go. But the running with the chocobo is absolutely the best. Thank God that was introduced, and we're able to get around that way, right? Because if I had to walk and climb, man, I would have been so frustrated this entire time. But I've had a good, solid time. It's just that was my biggest hiccup. And then let's get into the writing. Brad, from what you played, what is the writing doing for you right now?
Okay, so I'll go back to Crisis Core, which is kind of like an in between. I could not play the new Crisis Core compared to the one on PSP. It was just the writing. The writing was stuck in when the original one came out. Like it was, I want to say 2004,
right? And
that writing never really transitioned into today's type of like what you'd expect. I did find that a lot of the delivery felt flat, like with Rebirth. Like some of the characters are meant to feel animated, but they just didn't really strike it with me. Like when you're going through Nibelheim in the flashback, and you hear a bunch of people talking instead of it being like different octaves. They all sounded the same,
Monotone.
just with different voices. Like it didn't have that
Emotion.
peppy feel.
Yeah.
Like, oh, Cloud's back and Sephiroth the Savior's here, but it's just like it almost seemed like the NPCs, just the voice actors didn't care.
Absolutely. It's when you get around into these other towns and villages and cities, it looks stunning, right? Like graphically, you can't complain about this game. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. You get into these little areas and like, man, this looks believable. It looks lived in until you start walking through it. And then you listen, like you say, Brad, to the NPCs. Dude, that doesn't change. I'll tell you right now, that doesn't change.
Yeah.
The more you proceed through, the more that kind of pops. And it's just like, huh. And it's in the distance. And then you start introducing yourself to some of these characters, and they're just so dull sometimes.
Yeah.
But then other
There's a
times,
lot of characters.
there is a ton of characters. There is an absolute
lots to
ton of
take in.
characters. So there's a lot happening. The story basically is us trying to find Sephiroth right now. And that's kind of, without getting into any further details, that's the main premise of where we're going, right? And then the cloaks are there. And like there's a lot of cool, very, very cool elements. The story is like, okay, this is what had me. It was a story. And then I'm beelining it past the monsters. You don't have to fight everything, but you can if you want to. And then you take on all these other side activities that open up into other things. Like there's a ton of content here that it will easily keep you going for hours upon hours. Where was I? It was chapter 2 and I was 8 hours in. Like that's kind of like, that's just chapter 2. There's a lot more chapters ahead of you, believe me. So like when you get into this, you can really just sink months and months into this game. I think at the end of the day, people are either gonna love it or they're just gonna be on the fence about it. And I'm kind of caught in between because there are certain moments when you get into this side quest. Steve, I don't know if you got to the bandits, but dude, the bandits were so over the top cheese ball mechanics and just cheese ball writing. Like some of the writing is so good, and then some of it is just cringeworthy. And that's the part of Final Fantasy that's always pulled me out of it, right? Where 16, I was hooked the entire time. 16,
I was going to say the same thing.
Right? 16 has me. Where this, I was just like, I just want more 16. If that
They're
makes
trying
sense.
to be comical. I think the bandits are trying to be
it's
funny
horrible.
and comical, or like this run. You know, you can stay here, and it's like
that goes back to that 1997 writing. What for Final Fantasy was like. I'm honestly surprised with today's day and age that the whole Barrett and all of them are terrorists, like essentially, because that's what Avalanche was. You're an eco-terrorist. Yeah. And like you can't even say that word these days, and it's like wow, they still got by calling them terrorists. And but like that, that's just the way that the game was written. It's almost like, okay, we're gonna update everything, but we're not gonna update the script.
Yeah. What were you thinking there, Steve?
I'm not. Yeah, the script is okay. I think that for me, not playing in the other ones, I don't know if I need to know a lot of the backstory. So I was only really playing the remake in this one, and I did do a little bit of research, and there is a lot of stuff going on with all the characters. You know, things have changed, and so I was getting confused a little bit, but I just stick to the main characters. The main ones, obviously, Cloud, Tifa, Barrett, Red, those ones. I do love them ones, but all the other characters that are getting introduced as we progress, it's like, I ain't got a clue what's going on here.
It really comes down to the cheeseball writing, but then we get into the combat and some of the boss battles, and wow, right, that's the Final Fantasy that stands out to me. It has always stood out, and Rebirth is no different. Man, when you get into some of these boss battles and they introduce synergy, which was this new ability to like team up and then perform these over-the-top magical moments right together. It is awesome. It is stunning. It is so cool to have these. I like the ability to just smash your buttons, but then also if you want to slow it down, get in that time mechanic, right? And then okay, well now I select my ability. Or now I'm gonna go in and select an item. I gotta heal up. I'm gonna heal Red instead of myself as Cloud, or go over to Barrett, right? Swap out my party. You gotta swap out the party before you get into the boss fight. Just a heads up on that one, because if you're playing Cloud and you got a boss that's in the air, Cloud sucks. It's just he's no good then, really, right? It's like, man, okay, well then you have to go with somebody else and change things up. So but the problem is you don't know who you're fighting until you get in there. But it's one of those things. Man, if I would have just swapped out the party during a boss fight, that would have been a little bit nicer to achieve that fight. But you get through it, and at the end of the day. But for me, it really comes down just to the story. Combat is solid. The story, though, is really what stands out moving it forward. If you can get past all the cheeseball side stuff.
Yeah.
Brad, did you have questions for us that you wanted to know about the game?
So yeah, I was just wondering, like, when you play Remake, if you're a completionist, like I was just saying, I'm not really a trophy collector, so that doesn't bother me. I finished Remake at about 23 hours. So how long is Rebirth compared to that?
You're gonna easily double your time. They're like, yeah. This one, like, so Remake was, I felt more of a point A to point B situation, where Rebirth is like wide open, right? All of a sudden now you're able to go almost wherever you want, in a sense, without having to. You can follow the story, but you can deviate off to other things. The amount of side content will keep you going for hours and upon hours, right? So to do everything, if you are a completionist, you're gonna spend a long time playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and I think you're gonna enjoy it all the same too. I don't think you're gonna be like, man, this is a waste of time. That's what I said. People are either gonna love this or they're gonna be on the fence. But if you're all in and you're going that completionist route, you have a ton of work ahead of you. And for the most part, it's pretty good if you can get past those cheesy bandits. Really kind of put me off. All right, all in all, I think we've all had a decent time with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, where we are in our moments. Brad, obviously you're not playing the full game, so I'm going to give it to you first. Playing the demo, what are your hopes for the rest of the game, and what would you score just the demo?
So like, I hope that the rest of the game kind of follows this new path that they've taken from Remake.
Yeah.
The demo did hook me, like, as Steve had mentioned and I had mentioned before. Like, there are some, I would say, glaring camera angle issues, like especially in the tight areas. Like you move like a little bit, and then all of a sudden you're looking at a wall, and it's like, okay, well, where am I going? And then you try and fix yourself, and you can't correct anything, so you have to backtrack and then go do it again. I mean, I've been a fan of the series obviously since it came out on PS1. Not overly crazy from what I've seen in the demo. I'm not overly crazy about some of the characters that they've introduced, that were introduced in this new world of Crisis Core. That, again, this doesn't affect you guys because you've never played the original, so it's what it is. Just based on the review, like, I mean, I still do have high hopes for the game because it's a Final Fantasy game, apart from 15. I gotta say, I'm hoping it's a Game of the Year contender, but right now, Infinite Wealth, I gotta drop it. It's my Game of the Year.
Sure.
But just based on the demo, I'd probably give Rebirth around an 8.5. Sorry.
8.5. Nice. Steve, what are you wrapping up? We obviously have played the full game. What do you score in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth?
To be honest with you, because I've not gone as far as the chapters that I would like to have gone, so I'm just scoring this of what I've played so far, which is quite a few hours. I'm actually giving this an 8.5 because the chocobos, when you're riding them, it is so janky when you're moving. The whole screen moves up and down, and it kind of put me off a little bit, even though it's a quicker way to transverse. But the jankiness and the climbing as well was becoming a little bit frustrating for me.
Fair enough, fair enough. At the end of the day, for me, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is a solid game. I think this will be, for some people, for their Game of the Year discussion. I honestly think it is. But it does have that cheese writing with some of the characters that really just, man, when you come off of Final Fantasy 16, right? And I know Final Fantasy 7 Remake is completely different than 16, but it puts the Final Fantasy world in a different mind frame, at least for the newcomers like myself. So then to get back into Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth and not have the same kind of writing and dialogue and interaction, land traversal, it puts me in a different place. But going back to just Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, the world is beautiful. Some of the characters are super cool. The writing, I just keep going back to that bandit writing. And man, those bandits really put me off. And it's just so hard to get past. But then you get into the main story with Cloud, the characters, the way the battle system works, the boss fights. It is magical at moments, but disheartening at others. So for me, I'm kind of caught in the middle, right? For me, I got to go with an 8.
They're nothing.